Hello and welcome back to PoliSci 110. I am your professor, James Strickland, and this lecture focuses on how the states are different from the federal government and different from each other. To give you a point of comparison, state governments are actually major entities within American politics. Let's compare how many people work for the states and how much money the states spend to those statistics for the federal government. So every year, the federal government spends about $3 to $4 trillion. It employs about 2 million people as well. These statistics are from 2016, before the pandemic caused things to get a little weird. If we were to compare those statistics for the federal government to the statistics for the states, we find that all 50 state governments spend roughly the same amount of money and hire many more people than the federal government. The state governments really are major entities in American politics, and they make policy on a variety of topics. If you are wondering why 19 million people work for the states, whereas only 2 million work for the federal government, one of your biggest categories of state workers are teachers in public schools. And your professor, me, is technically a state employee of Arizona as well. I work at Arizona State University. Now, we live in a system with federalism, which helps to explain why these states are such big governments or major entities. They're important. In federalism, we have a system of governance in which multiple layers of government share powers. So the multiple layers would be our federal government, the states, and the local governments as well, which include counties, cities, and special districts like school districts. Two levels of government may share the same land and people, but they make policy on different areas. So the federal government, as we indicated earlier, makes policy for trade. It conducts diplomacy. But the states actually deal with other issues. They make most of the education policy. They make a lot of healthcare decisions as well. And they are responsible for most of the policing powers in America and for other services like fighting fires. And importantly, one of the traits of federalism is that the states have their legal protections and the federal government has its legal protections as well. Even though the Constitution determines or states that federal laws are supreme, that's the supremacy clause, the states have legal protections within that Constitution as well. There are certain functions that the federal government is limited from encroaching upon or limited in terms of conducting that are reserved for the states. Our federalist system is different from a unitary system. In a unitary system, which tends to be most political systems around the world, those regional or state governments don't have legal protections. Instead, a lot of the power is at the central government. And the unitary system is different from the confederal system, which we had talked about earlier under the Articles of Confederation. Under confederal system, a lot of power is concentrated at the states, and the central government is very weak. There have been only 2 confederations in the history of the United States. That includes the government under the Articles of Confederation and the Confederate States of America, or the southern states that seceded from the Union and therefore resulted in the Civil War of the 1860s. If we were to chart these out in terms of how much political control the central government has, we find that the unitary system is most centralized, the confederal system is least centralized, where the states have the most power, and federalism tries to achieve that right balance where the federal government has some power and the states have other powers, and they both coexist, hopefully in a peaceful manner. Now, in America, there are many state and local governments. There are actually more than 90,000. There are 50 states, but there are many, many cities, counties, and school districts. And the vast majority of those local governments employ people and have elected officials and may charge you taxes as well. So it's not just a case that you're paying income taxes to the federal government. Some states have their own income taxes. Many states have sales taxes. There's no federal sales tax. And there can also be local taxes as well on your income, although typically only your very large cities have income taxes. And so the divided power between the states, the federal government, and the local governments is a hallmark of this federalist political system. Technically, the local governments exist at the pleasure of the state governments. If a state legislature wanted to dissolve a city or a county, it has the legal right to do so. However, that is usually a politically difficult thing to do. And this chart gives you a very overall idea of how many local governments there are within the United States. There are more than 3,000 counties, 50 states, as I mentioned, and nearly 20,000 municipalities and many, many school districts, 13,000 and 16,000 towns. So we have a lot of governments in the United States. Now, this idea about federal versus state powers might sound somewhat complicated to you. How can two existing governments have the same territory and yet they have different powers? Federal powers are known as the enumerated powers. These are from Article 1, Section 8 of the US Constitution. And these include the right to declare war, for example, to conduct foreign policy, engage in diplomacy, to regulate commerce among the several states and with Indian tribes, and to make all laws necessary and proper to carry out those functions. As I mentioned earlier, these powers are explicitly outlined in the US Constitution to help solve collective action problems that emerge between states. We don't want states fighting or arguing with each other. We don't want a different foreign policy from between North Carolina and New York, for example, or different immigration policy even. And so these powers have been delegated to the federal government. But you will imagine that there are many powers that are not included here, and those typically fall under the states. The 10th Amendment, as part of the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, gives all of the powers not mentioned to the states or to the people. And that's called the Reserve Clause. That powers not mentioned in the Constitution for the federal government are reserved to the states or to the people. And so what that means is that the states deal primarily with public safety, everyday issues. They deal primarily with education, marriage policy, adoption policy, and they also deal primarily with election policy. Initially, under the original US Constitution, the states were allowed to decide who could vote and who could not vote. There have been different court challenges over the years and different amendments that establish some guidelines, but states still have the authority to determine polling hours or locations, for example, which is a contentious issue very often. So what are some common differences between federal and state governments? Major differences include many different things. States often try to shift burdens onto each other. If one state can send pollution or garbage to another state, it often will try to do so. We often find, for example, that states will build factories that produce air pollution on their borders that are known for being windy, and that air pollution is carried over into another state. States try to compete for jobs frequently. Often governors will appear in other states to try to steal businesses away from those other states and bring them back to their home states. States have direct democracy, or at least 26 states have direct democracy, where people vote directly on policy. There is no direct democracy at the national level in the United States. Governors have different powers than the president. Legislatures are different from the Congress. They're usually much less professional. They meet on a part-time basis. State judges tend to be elected, but federal judges are appointed for life. And states determine the county and the city boundaries and even the existence. So the federal government typically does not focus on these local issues. That's clearly a question that's within the purview of the states. So to give you a brief idea of a big difference between governors and the president, many governors exercise the line item veto. That is, they are able to veto a specific item within a bill passed by the legislature. The president of the United States does not have the line item veto. Instead, the president can only veto an entire bill or nothing at all. Back in the 1990s, Congress did give the president the power to line item veto. The idea was that the president would help to rein in spending that was wasteful, and that appeared within bills. But the Supreme Court said that the Constitution does not give the president the ability to veto particular items within bills. There's one national official elected by the people, that is the president. He is an executive, but in the states, there are often many different officials who are elected by the people, who are considered executive branch officials. So in Arizona, for example, you would have the governor, the attorney general, school superintendent, treasurer, secretary of state, mine inspector, and 5 corporation commissioners, all elected on a statewide basis as executive branch officials, very different from the federal government. There are also differences in term limits as well. The president is limited to 2 terms, as are many governors, but in states shaded in green, governors can serve unlimited numbers of terms. In the single state shaded in blue, the governor can serve only 1 term at a time. They cannot seek re-election, although they can skip a term if they want to serve again. And whereas the vice president becomes president if the president can no longer serve in office, the states are different. In a number of states, the Secretary of State becomes the governor if the governor can no longer serve in office. That is the case in Arizona. And governors differ in terms of their different powers. Some governors are quite weak institutionally, and some governors are quite strong. For example, not every state allows for the line item veto, but those governors who have a line item veto are very powerful because they can negotiate with the legislature about specific provisions within a bill. We will discuss next time some major issues that occur because of federalism. Thank you.